The reporter's camera was already rolling. Through the iron gates of the mansion, Daniel Rodriguez stood in his expensive suit, his face twisted with rage as he stared at the white van with the bright red logo. Channel 7 News, truth above all. Inside the house, in the beautiful blue bedroom on the third floor, Elena Martinez clutched her daughter Sofia's hand so tightly that the little girl whimpered. Elena's face had gone completely white, like all the blood had drained out of her body. The hope that had been growing in her chest just moments ago, the tiny flame of possibility that her life might actually get better, was drowning in ice-cold terror. "Mama," Sofia whispered, her voice small and scared. "What's happening? Why are there reporters? But before I go further, where are you watching from today? Drop your country or city in the comments below. Your support means everything to us." Elena couldn't answer. Her throat had closed up. All she could think about was the headline she could already see in her mind. "Billionaire holds sick woman and child captive." She could see herself on the news, looking weak and helpless. She could see Sofia's scared face plastered across every television screen in the city. Their apartment building manager would see it. Sofia's school would see it. Everyone would see it. And worse, nobody would believe the truth. Who would believe that a billionaire just decided to help them out of kindness? Who would believe that the richest man in the state had knelt on his own kitchen floor to clean up spilled pasta with a starving 10-year-old girl? It sounded crazy even to Elena, and she had lived it. Daniel turned from the window, his jaw tight. His eyes were dark with a fury Elena had never seen before. But when he looked at her, when he saw the terror on her face, his expression softened just a little. "Elena," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I need you to listen to me very carefully." Elena nodded, but she was shaking so badly she could barely stand. "That woman," Daniel continued, pointing toward the window, "Miss Geraldine, she called the press. She told them lies. She told them I'm keeping you here against your will. She told them I'm some kind of monster." "I know, sir," Elena whispered, her voice breaking. "I know. And it's all my fault. If Sofia hadn't been in the kitchen, if I had just kept her in the apartment, if I had—" "Stop," Daniel said, his voice sharp but not unkind. "This is not your fault. This is the desperate act of a thief who got caught. She's trying to destroy me before I can destroy her." There was a loud buzzing sound. The intercom by the door crackled to life. It was George, the head of security, his voice tense and professional. "Mr. Rodriguez, sir. The reporter is demanding a statement. He says if you don't come down and talk to him in the next 5 minutes, he's going to run the story as is. He says he has a quote from Miss Geraldine calling you a cruel man who preys on desperate workers." Elena felt like she was going to be sick. Her stomach twisted into a painful knot. Daniel's face went dark. For a moment, he looked like he might punch the wall. But instead, he took a long, slow breath. Then he did something Elena didn't expect. He smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a man who had fought in boardrooms with sharks and won. It was the smile of a predator. "Tell the reporter," Daniel said into the intercom, his voice cold and calm, "that he can wait exactly as long as I want him to wait. Tell him if he steps 1 foot on my property, I will have him arrested for trespassing. And tell him that if he runs his story without talking to me first, I will sue him and his cheap little news station for everything they have." "Yes, sir," George said. The intercom clicked off. Elena stared at him. "Sir, you can't sue them. They'll just make it worse. They'll say you're trying to silence the truth. They'll—" "Elena," Daniel said, turning to face her fully. "Do you want to leave?" The question hung in the air like a heavy stone. "What?" Elena asked. "Right now," Daniel said. "Do you want to take Sofia and walk out that front door? Do you want to go to the reporters and tell them I held you captive? Do you want to be on the news?" Elena's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. "Because if you do," Daniel continued, "I won't stop you. I won't sue anyone. I'll let you tell whatever story you want. But I need to know right now, Elena, are you with me or are you against me?" Sofia pulled on her mother's sleeve. "Mama, what's he saying?" Elena looked down at her daughter. Sofia's eyes were wide and confused, but they weren't scared anymore. Not of Mr. Rodriguez, anyway. Sofia trusted him. After just one night, one bowl of warm macaroni and cheese, one act of kindness, this little girl trusted the richest man she'd ever met. And Elena realized something. She trusted him too. "I'm with you, sir," Elena said, her voice shaking but clear. "We're with you." Daniel's hard expression softened. He nodded once. "Good. Then we fight." He walked to the desk, picked up the phone, and dialed a number. It rang twice. Rebecca, Daniel said. I need you at the house. Now. Yes, now. I don't care if you're at your daughter's recital. This is a crisis. Bring your camera crew. Elena frowned. Camera crew? Daniel hung up and turned to her. Rebecca Chun, he explained. She's a journalist. A real one. She works for the Times, not some trashy tabloid station. She's been trying to interview me for 3 years. I've always said no. And now? Elena asked. Now, Daniel said, a grim smile on his face. I'm going to give her the biggest story of her career. 15 minutes later, Elena and Sophia were sitting on the small sofa in the blue room. Sophia was clutching her great uncle's cufflink in one hand and Elena's hand in the other. They could hear voices downstairs. Loud voices. Angry voices. Then footsteps on the stairs. The door opened. Daniel walked in, and behind him was a tall woman with short black hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. She was wearing jeans and a blazer, and she was carrying a large black bag over her shoulder. Behind her were 2 younger people, a man with a camera and a woman with a microphone. Elena Sophia, Daniel said, gesturing to the woman. This is Rebecca Chin. She's going to help us tell the truth. Rebecca smiled. It was a kind smile, but her eyes were studying everything. The room. Elena's uniform. Sophia's worn-out shoes. The expensive furniture. Mrs. Martinez, Rebecca said, her voice warm. I'm not here to ambush you. I'm here to listen. Mr. Rodriguez told me what happened. But I need to hear it from you. Elena's heart was pounding. I don't know what to say. Start at the beginning, Rebecca said gently. She sat down in the chair across from the sofa. The camera guy stood behind her, his camera pointed at Elena. The red light was on. They were recording. Elena felt like she was going to faint. Mama, Sophia whispered. Tell her about Uncle Miguel. Elena looked at her daughter. Sophia's face was serious, determined. She looked like a tiny soldier. And Elena remembered. We are not people who run. We are people who help. Elena took a shaky breath. She looked directly at the camera, at the glowing red light. My name is Elena Martinez, she began, her voice quiet but steady. I'm a maid. I worked here in Mr. Rodriguez's house. And this is my daughter, Sophia. She's 10 years old. Rebecca nodded, encouraging her to continue. 3 nights ago, Elena said, Sophia was caught in Mr. Rodriguez's kitchen. She was eating leftovers. Food that was going to be thrown away. The camera zoomed in slightly. She was hungry, Elena continued, and her voice cracked. We were both hungry. I'm sick. My lungs are damaged from a fire that happened years ago. I ran back into a burning building to save people, and I breathed in too much smoke. Now I have a disease. It's called pulmonary fibrosis. Rebecca's professional mask slipped for just a second. Her eyes widened. The treatment is expensive, Elena said. More than I could ever afford. So I gave all my money to the hospital, and we ate oatmeal. Just oatmeal and bread. But Sophia, she's growing. She's a child. She needs more than that. Sophia squeezed her mother's hand. So she snuck into the kitchen, Elena said. She was going to eat the garbage. And Mr. Rodriguez found her. Rebecca leaned forward. What did he do? Elena smiled just a little. He fed her. The reporter blinked. He fed her. He made her a hot meal, Elena said. He sat with her. He talked to her. And when he found out I was sick, when he found out we were struggling, he didn't fire me. He didn't call the police. He helped us. How? Rebecca asked. He paid my hospital bills, Elena said, tears now streaming down her face. All of them. He sent me to the best lung doctor in the state. He gave us a room in his house. He's giving me time to heal. Her voice broke completely. He saved our lives. The room was silent except for Elena's quiet sobs. Rebecca turned to Daniel, who was standing by the window. Is this true? Every word, Daniel said quietly. Then why? Rebecca asked. Did your housekeeper call Channel 7 and tell them you're holding this woman and child captive? Daniel's jaw tightened. Because I fired her. And because before I fired her, I caught her stealing from me. Rebecca's eyes went wide. Stealing? Nearly $2 million over 10 years, Daniel said flatly. Fake invoices. Padded overtime. A shell company. She turned my home into her personal bank account, and she ruled the staff with fear so nobody would ever question her. Do you have proof? Rebecca asked. I have a signed confession, Daniel said. And bank records. And a repayment agreement. Rebecca sat back, her mind clearly racing. This wasn't just a human interest story anymore. This was a scandal. A real one. So she lied to the press, Rebecca said slowly, to get revenge. Exactly, Daniel said. Rebecca turned to Elena. Mrs. Martinez, if I asked you right now on camera, do you want to leave this house? What would you say? Elena looked at Sophia. Then she looked at Daniel Rodriguez, the man who had knelt on his kitchen floor to clean up spilled pasta. The man who had faced down a tyrant to protect them. I would say no, Elena said clearly. I would say this is the safest I've felt in 5 years. I would say Mr. Rodriguez is a good man. Rebecca smiled. A real smile this time. She turned to her camera guy. Did you get all of that? Every second, he said. Rebecca stood up and extended her hand to Daniel. Mr. Rodriguez, I'm going to need that confession from Miss Geraldine. And the bank records. And I'm going to need to talk to your head of security. And then, she said, her eyes gleaming, I'm going to go down to that gate and have a little chat with Channel 7. Daniel shook her hand. Thank you, Rebecca. Don't thank me yet, Rebecca said. This story is going to explode. You understand that, right? By tomorrow morning, your face is going to be on every news channel in the country. I know, Daniel said. Good, Rebecca said. Then let's make sure they get the real story. 30 minutes later, Elena and Sophia watched from the window as Rebecca Chun walked down the long driveway toward the front gate. The Channel 7 van was still there, and the reporter, a young man with slicked-back hair and an expensive suit, was pacing back and forth, talking rapidly on his phone. When he saw Rebecca approaching, he hung up and smiled. It was a slimy, arrogant smile. Rebecca Chun, he called out. Come to steal my story? Rebecca stopped a few feet from the gate. Her camera guy was behind her, filming everything. Actually, Tom, Rebecca said, her voice cold, I came to make sure you don't get sued into oblivion for libel. Tom's smile faltered. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that you're about to run a completely false story, Rebecca said. I just spent the last half hour inside that house. I interviewed Elena Martinez and her daughter. I have a signed confession from a fired housekeeper admitting to embezzlement. And I have Daniel Rodriguez himself on camera explaining exactly what happened. Tom's face went pale. You're bluffing. Am I? Rebecca asked. She pulled out her phone and played a clip. It was Elena's voice, clear and strong. Mr. Rodriguez is a good man. He saved our lives. Tom stared at the phone. His mouth opened and closed like a fish. So here's what's going to happen, Rebecca said, stepping closer to the gate. You're going to get in your van. You're going to drive back to your station. And you're going to kill this story. Because if you run it, the Times is going to run the real story tomorrow morning. And when people see that you reported lies from a thief instead of doing actual journalism, your career is over. Tom's face turned red. You can't. I already did, Rebecca said. She turned and walked away, her camera guy following. Tom stood there frozen. Then he kicked the gate hard. He screamed a curse word so loud that even from the 3rd floor, Sophia heard it and gasped. But then he got into his van. And he drove away. Inside the blue room, Elena collapsed onto the sofa. Her whole body was shaking. Sophia climbed up next to her and wrapped her small arms around her mother's waist. Mama, Sophia whispered. Is it over? Elena looked out the window. The gate was empty now. The threat was gone. But she knew this wasn't over. Not really. The story was still going to come out. The world was still going to know about them. But for the first time in a long time, Elena wasn't afraid. I don't know, baby, Elena said honestly. But we're safe. That's what matters. There was a soft knock on the door. Daniel entered, looking exhausted but satisfied. They're gone, he said. Thank you, sir, Elena said. Thank you for everything. Daniel nodded. Get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be a very long day. As he turned to leave, Sophia called out. Mr. Rodriguez? He stopped. Yes, Sophia? You're a hero, Sophia said simply. Just like my great-uncle Miguel. Daniel looked at the little girl, at her serious face and her bright eyes. And for the first time in 10 years since his wife had died, Daniel Rodriguez felt something warm and alive growing in his chest. Thank you, Sophia, he said quietly. That means more than you know. He closed the door. Elena held her daughter close, and for a moment, everything was still. But outside, in the city, phones were ringing. Newsrooms were buzzing. Rebecca Chun was writing the story that would change everything. And in a small, dark apartment across town, Miss Geraldine sat alone, staring at her phone. She had just gotten a text message from her lawyer. It said, "We need to talk. Now." She threw the phone across the room, and it shattered against the wall. The morning sun hit Elena's face like a warm hand, gentle and soft. For the first time in years, she hadn't woken up coughing. Her lungs still hurt, still felt heavy, but the sharp, stabbing pain that usually ripped through her chest every morning was quieter. She opened her eyes slowly. The blue room was bathed in golden light. Sophia was still asleep next to her, curled up like a tiny kitten in the massive bed, her mouth slightly open, her hand clutching the silver cufflink even in her dreams. Elena's heart squeezed so tight it hurt in a completely different way. This child, this brave, hungry, beautiful child had spent a year watching her mother slowly die. A year of oatmeal dinners and empty cupboards. A year of pretending everything was okay when nothing was okay. And now Sophia was sleeping in a bed that probably cost more than their entire apartment. Now she was safe. Now she was warm. Elena reached out and gently touched Sophia's cheek. Her daughter didn't wake up. She just smiled a little in her sleep. "I'm going to get better," Elena whispered, her voice breaking. "I promise you, baby. I'm going to fight. I'm going to get better. And we're going to have a real life." A soft knock interrupted the moment. "Come in," Elena called quietly, sitting up and smoothing down her wrinkled uniform. The door opened, and Maria, the kind cook from downstairs, peeked her head in. Her eyes were red and puffy like she'd been crying, but she was smiling the biggest smile Elena had ever seen. "Mrs. Martinez," Maria whispered, trying not to wake Sophia. "I brought you breakfast. And I wanted to tell you something." She pushed a cart into the room. It was loaded with scrambled eggs, fresh fruit, toast with real butter, orange juice, and a pot of coffee that smelled like heaven. But Maria wasn't looking at the food. She was looking at Elena with eyes full of tears. "What is it?" Elena asked, worried. "Maria, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," Maria said, her voice shaking. "Everything's right. For the first time in 10 years, everything's right." She sat down on the edge of the bed, completely forgetting the rules about staff sitting in guest rooms. She grabbed Elena's hands. "Miss Geraldine," Maria said, her words tumbling out fast. "She was horrible to all of us. Not just you. All of us. She screamed at me every day. She told me my cooking was garbage. She made my daughter cry when she came to visit me at work. She threatened to fire me if I ever took a day off, even when my mother died." Tears were streaming down Maria's face now. "But we were all too scared to say anything," she continued. "We needed our jobs. We needed the money. So we just took it. We let her treat us like dirt. And we hated ourselves for it." Elena squeezed her hands. I know exactly what you mean. But you," Maria said, looking at Elena with something like wonder. "You didn't just take it. Your daughter didn't just take it. Sophia was brave enough to be hungry in front of Mr. Rodriguez. And you were brave enough to tell him the truth." "I didn't have a choice," Elena whispered. "Yes, you did," Maria said firmly. "You could have lied. You could have protected yourself. But you trusted him. And because you trusted him, because Sophia trusted him, everything changed. For all of us." Maria pulled out her phone. Her hands were shaking as she opened it and showed Elena the screen. It was a news article from the Times. The headline read, "Billionaire Daniel Rodriguez exposes decade of theft and abuse in his own home. Protects sick mother and daughter from vengeful ex-employee." Below the headline was a photo. It was Elena and Sophia, sitting on the blue sofa, looking directly at the camera. Elena's eyes were red from crying, but her face was strong. And next to them, standing tall and serious, was Daniel Rodriguez. The article had been published just 2 hours ago. It already had 47,000 shares. Elena's hands flew to her mouth. "Oh my God! Read the comments," Maria said, scrolling down. Elena read, her eyes getting wider with every word. "This man is a real hero. That housekeeper should be in jail. I'm crying at my desk. This is what kindness looks like. Daniel Rodriguez just became my favorite billionaire. That little girl's great-uncle was a Tuskegee airman? They're a family of heroes. Sharing this everywhere. People need to know the real story." There were thousands of comments. Thousands. Elena couldn't breathe. Not because of her lungs this time, but because the world was looking at her. Looking at Sophia. Looking at their pain and their hope and their story. "We're famous," Elena whispered, her voice barely audible. "You're more than famous," Maria said, wiping her eyes. "You're heroes. You stood up to a monster. And now everyone knows." Sophia stirred, rubbing her eyes. "Mama, why are you crying?" Elena couldn't answer. She just pulled her daughter into her arms and held her so tight, Sophia squeaked. Mama, you're squishing me. I love you. Elena sobbed into Sophia's messy braids. I love you so much. I love you too, Sophia said, confused but hugging back just as tight. Can I have breakfast now? Downstairs, in his study, Daniel Rodriguez was on his fourth cup of coffee. He hadn't slept. His phone had been ringing nonstop since 6 a.m. The mayor had called to congratulate him. 3 different charities had called asking for donations. His old business rivals had called, some to praise him, some to accuse him of doing this for publicity. And his son, Marcus, who lived in California and rarely called, had left a voicemail that Daniel had listened to 7 times already. Dad, I saw the news. I saw what you did for that family. I wanted to say I'm proud of you. I know we haven't talked much since Mom died, but maybe I should visit. Maybe we should talk. Call me back, okay? I love you. Daniel's throat was tight as he saved the message. Again, George, his head of security, walked in without knocking. He looked exhausted but excited. Sir, you need to see this. He placed a tablet on Daniel's desk. It was open to Channel 7's website. The headline read, Channel 7 apologizes for nearly publishing false story about local billionaire. Daniel leaned forward, reading quickly. The article was short and humiliating. Channel 7 had issued a public apology. They had fired the reporter, Tom, for failure to verify sources. They admitted they had been fed false information by a disgruntled former employee. They're covering their asses, George said bluntly. But at least they admitted they were wrong. Daniel smiled grimly. Good. There's more, George said. He pulled up another article. This one was from a legal blog. Former housekeeper faces possible criminal charges for embezzlement and false reporting. The district attorney's office called me an hour ago, George explained. They want to press charges. They said with the confession and the bank records, it's an open and shut case. Daniel sat back in his chair, processing this. Miss Geraldine wouldn't just lose her job. She would lose her freedom. How do you feel about that, sir? George asked quietly. Daniel thought about Elena's face last night. The fear in her eyes. The shame. The desperation of a mother who would do anything, sacrifice anything, to save her child. He thought about Sophia, small and brave, clutching a dead hero's cufflink. He thought about his own wife, Eliza, who had died slowly and painfully while he threw himself into work because he couldn't bear to watch her suffer. I feel, Daniel said slowly, like justice is finally being served. By noon, the story had exploded. It was trending on every social media platform. Hashtag Justice for Elena was the #1 hashtag. People were sharing Rebecca Chen's article, adding their own stories of abusive bosses, of struggling to pay medical bills, of hunger and fear, and the kindness of strangers. Someone had created a GoFundMe to help other families like Elena's. It had raised $200,000 in 3 hours. A famous actor had retweeted the story saying, "This is what real wealth looks like. Using your power to protect the powerless." But it wasn't all positive. Some people accused Daniel of doing this for attention. Some said he was just trying to fix his image after years of being a cold, heartless businessman. Some said Elena was lying, that she was just a con artist. Rebecca Chen called Daniel at 2 p.m. "Have you seen the backlash?" she asked. "I have," Daniel said calmly. "Do you want to respond?" "No," Daniel said. "The truth is already out there. People can believe it or not. That's their choice." Rebecca was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You're different than I expected, Mr. Rodriguez." "How so?" "Most men in your position would be desperate to control the narrative," she said. "They'd be holding press conferences, doing interviews, spinning everything. But you're just quiet." "I spent 10 years being quiet," Daniel said. "Hiding in my grief. Ignoring the world. I'm done hiding. But I'm also done performing. Let people see the truth. Let them decide." Rebecca laughed softly. "You're either the bravest man I've ever met or the most foolish." "Maybe both," Daniel admitted. That evening, Daniel did something he hadn't done in a decade. He walked into the main dining room, the massive room with the table set for 12 that no one ever used, and he sat down at the head of the table. Maria had outdone herself. The table was covered with food. Gumbo, just like she'd promised. Fresh bread. Salad. Roasted vegetables. A chocolate cake that looked like it belonged in a magazine. One by one, the staff filed in. Maria and her assistant cook. The young maids. The groundskeeper. Ben, the driver. And Elena and Sophia. Elena hesitated in the doorway, her hand on Sophia's shoulder. She was wearing clean clothes now, simple jeans and a soft blue sweater that one of the maids had lent her. Her hair was down, falling in soft waves around her face. She looked less like a maid and more like herself. "Come in," Daniel said gently. "Sit." Elena and Sophia sat across from him. Sophia's eyes were huge as she stared at the food. "Can I really eat this?" she whispered to her mother. "Yes, baby," Elena said, her voice thick. "You can eat as much as you want." Daniel raised his glass of water. Everyone looked at him. "I know this has been a strange few days," he began. "I know the world is watching us now. I know things will never be quite the same. But I want to say something." He looked around the table, at these people who worked for him, who had suffered under Miss Geraldine's cruelty, who had been invisible in his own home. "I'm sorry," he said simply. Maria gasped. "I'm sorry I didn't see what was happening," Daniel continued. "I'm sorry I let someone hurt you. I'm sorry I was so lost in my own grief that I forgot there were real people in this house. People who needed me." His voice broke slightly. "But I see you now," he said. "All of you. And I promise you, things are going to change. This is no longer just a house. It's going to be a home. For all of us." There was a long silence. Then Sophia stood up on her chair. She raised her cup of juice high in the air. "To Mr. Rodriguez," she declared in her small, clear voice. "The hero who saved us." And everyone laughed and raised their glasses. And for the first time in 10 years, the dining room was full of light and noise and life. Subscribe to this channel to support our growth and be part of this journey. Hit that button now, and let's keep sharing stories that matter. 3 weeks had passed since the story broke. 3 weeks of Elena's life feeling like someone else's dream. Every morning, she woke up in the blue room. Every morning, Sophia bounced on the bed, full of energy and laughter. Every morning, Elena took her medicine, went to her therapy sessions with Dr. Evans, and felt her lungs getting just a tiny bit stronger. But this morning was different. This morning, Elena woke up to the sound of shouting. She sat up fast, her heart pounding. Sophia was still asleep, her face peaceful in the early light. Elena grabbed her robe and rushed to the window. Down below, at the front gate, there was a crowd. Not reporters this time. Regular people. At least 30 of them, holding signs. Elena's blood ran cold. Were they protesters? Had the people who didn't believe the story come to attack them? She pressed her face against the glass, trying to read the signs. Then her breath caught in her throat. One sign said, "Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez." Another said, "Elena and Sophia, you inspire US." Another had a picture of a Tuskegee airman with the words, "Heroes raise heroes." They weren't protesters. They were supporters. Elena's hands flew to her mouth as tears spilled down her cheeks. These people, complete strangers, had driven here just to show their support. Just to say they cared. There was a gentle knock on the door. "Come in," Elena called, wiping her eyes quickly. Daniel entered, and he looked different. He was wearing jeans and a simple gray sweater instead of his usual suit. His hair was a little messy, and he was smiling. Actually smiling. "Did you see them?" he asked. "Yes," Elena whispered. "I don't understand. Why are they here?" "Because your story gave them hope," Daniel said simply. "In a world that feels cruel and cold, you reminded people that kindness still exists. That one person can make a difference." Elena shook her head. "But I didn't do anything. You're the one who helped us." "You did everything," Daniel said, his voice firm but gentle. "You survived. You protected your daughter. You ran into a burning building to save people. You're the hero here, Elena. Not me. I just finally decided to stop being a coward." Before Elena could respond, Sophia woke up with a huge yawn. "Mama? Why are you crying again?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. Elena laughed through her tears. "Happy tears, baby. Just happy tears." "There's something else," Daniel said, his expression turning more serious. "George called me an hour ago. Miss Geraldine's lawyer wants to meet. Today. Here." Elena's smile vanished. "Why? What does she want?" "I don't know," Daniel admitted. "But I'm going to find out." At exactly 10 a.m., a black car pulled up to the mansion. George met it at the door, his expression hard and protective. A man in an expensive suit stepped out. He was young, maybe 35, with slicked back hair and a briefcase that probably cost more than Elena used to make in a month. "I'm Martin Hughes," the lawyer announced. "I'm here on behalf of my client, Geraldine Whitmore." "She can rot," Maria muttered from the kitchen doorway, loud enough for everyone to hear. The lawyer ignored her. My client wishes to speak with Mr. Rodriguez. In person. George stepped forward, his massive frame blocking the doorway. Absolutely not. She's outside in the car, the lawyer continued smoothly. She's unarmed, and she's willing to be searched. She just wants 5 minutes. That's all. Daniel appeared at the top of the stairs. Everyone turned to look at him. Let her in, he said calmly. Sir, I don't think, George began. Let her in, Daniel repeated. I want to hear what she has to say. George looked like he wanted to argue, but he stepped aside. The lawyer walked back to the car and opened the rear door. Miss Geraldine emerged. Elena, watching from the landing of the second floor with Sophia clutching her hand, barely recognized her. The woman who had once ruled this house like a tyrant now looked small. Her gray hair was loose and messy instead of pulled back in that tight, cruel bun. Her face was pale and drawn, with dark circles under her eyes. She was wearing a simple black dress instead of her crisp uniform. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in 3 weeks. George searched her roughly, checking for weapons or recording devices. She stood there like a statue, not protesting, not resisting. She's clean, George said, his voice dripping with disgust. Come in, Daniel said from the top of the stairs. My study. Miss Geraldine climbed the stairs slowly, like each step hurt. When she passed Elena and Sophia on the landing, she stopped. She looked at Elena, really looked at her. And then, to everyone's shock, Miss Geraldine's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, she whispered. Elena's mouth fell open. I'm so sorry, Miss Geraldine continued, her voice breaking. What I did to you, what I said about you, the way I treated you, there's no excuse. None. I was cruel and hateful, and you didn't deserve it. Neither of you did. She looked down at Sophia, who was hiding behind her mother's legs. You were just hungry, Miss Geraldine said, her voice barely audible. You were just a child who was hungry, and I called you a thief. I wanted to throw you out into the street. What kind of monster does that? A tear rolled down her cheek. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said. I needed you to know that I'm sorry, and that you're a better mother than I could ever have been. She turned and walked away before Elena could respond. Elena stood frozen on the landing, her mind spinning. That woman had terrorized her for months, had made her feel worthless, had tried to destroy her life. And now she was apologizing? Sophia tugged on her sleeve. Mama, is she good now? Elena didn't know how to answer that question. In Daniel's study, Miss Geraldine sat in the leather chair across from his desk. Her lawyer stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder. Daniel sat down, his expression unreadable. George stood by the door, arms crossed, watching her like a hawk. Why are you here? Daniel asked bluntly. To confess, Miss Geraldine said. Her voice was hoarse, like she'd been crying for days. Not just to you. To everyone. I want to confess publicly. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. My client is willing to make a full public statement admitting to everything. The theft. The lies to the press. The abuse of staff. Everything. Why? Daniel asked, leaning forward. Why now? Miss Geraldine looked at him with red, swollen eyes. Because I lost everything, she said simply. My job. My reputation. My friends. My family won't speak to me. Strangers recognize me on the street and call me horrible names. I can't even go to the grocery store without people staring at me like I'm some kind of monster. She took a shaky breath. And the worst part, she continued, is that they're right. I am a monster. I became the very thing I hated most. What do you mean? Daniel asked. I grew up poor, Miss Geraldine said. My mother cleaned houses. My father left when I was 5. We had nothing. I remember being hungry. I remember wearing clothes with holes in them. I remember being made fun of at school. Her hands clenched into fists on her lap. I swore I would never be poor again, she said. I worked so hard. I became the best housekeeper in the city. I was proud of myself. But somewhere along the way, I forgot where I came from. I forgot what it felt like to be powerless. She looked up at Daniel. When I saw that little girl in the kitchen eating scraps, she said, I should have seen myself. I should have remembered. But instead, I saw everything I hated about my past. And I wanted to destroy it. Daniel sat back, processing this. It didn't excuse what she'd done. Nothing could excuse it. But it explained it. What do you want from me? Daniel asked. Nothing, Miss Geraldine said. I know the district attorney is pressing charges. I know I'm probably going to prison. I deserve that. I wanted to apologize in person. And I wanted to ask. Her voice broke. I wanted to ask if Mrs. Martinez would be willing to hear my apology. If she would let me tell her, face to face, how sorry I am. Daniel stood up. That's not my decision to make. It's hers. 15 minutes later, Elena sat in the blue room, her hands trembling. Daniel had asked her if she wanted to speak with Miss Geraldine. He had said she could say no. She could walk away. She never had to see that woman again. But Elena had surprised herself. She had said yes. Now Miss Geraldine sat across from her, looking small and broken. Sophia was downstairs with Maria, making cookies. It was just the two of them. The silence stretched on, heavy and uncomfortable. I destroyed my life, Miss Geraldine finally said. I destroyed everything. And it's my own fault. Elena didn't respond. I thought I was better than everyone, the older woman continued. I thought because I had worked my way up, because I had money and power, that made me superior. But I was just a bully. A thief and a bully. She looked at Elena with desperate eyes. How do you do it? She asked. How do you stay kind when life is so cruel? Elena was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke. I had a choice, she said softly. When I got sick, when I lost everything, I had a choice. I could become bitter and angry at the world. Or I could hold on to the things that mattered. My daughter. My memories of good people. The legacy of my Uncle Miguel, who gave his life for others. She looked Miss Geraldine in the eyes. You made a different choice, Elena said. You chose anger. You chose cruelty. And now you're paying for it. I know, Miss Geraldine whispered. But, Elena continued, her voice stronger now, you're also making a different choice today. You came here. You apologized. You're taking responsibility. That takes courage. Miss Geraldine looked up, surprised. I don't forgive you, Elena said firmly. Not yet. Maybe not ever. What you did hurt me. It hurt my daughter. It hurt good people who didn't deserve it. I understand, Miss Geraldine said, tears streaming down her face. But, Elena said, standing up, I don't hate you either. I pity you. Because you had everything, and you threw it all away for money and power. And now you have nothing. She walked to the door, then paused. I hope you find peace, Elena said quietly. I really do. Because carrying around that much hate and anger, it's a prison. And life's too short to live in a prison you built yourself. She left the room, closing the door softly behind her. Miss Geraldine sat alone in the blue room and sobbed. That evening, Elena tucked Sophia into bed. The little girl was exhausted from baking cookies all day with Maria. Mama, Sophia asked sleepily. Yes, baby? Are we going to live here forever? Elena stroked her daughter's hair. I don't know, sweetheart. But wherever we live, we'll be together. And we'll be okay. Promise. Promise. Sophia's eyes drifted closed, and soon she was breathing deeply, lost in dreams. Elena walked to the window and looked out at the dark gardens. In the distance, she could see lights from the city. Somewhere out there, Miss Geraldine was facing her demons. Somewhere out there, people were struggling, just like she had struggled. But here, in this moment, Elena was safe. Sophia was safe. And that was everything. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Your support means we can keep bringing you stories of hope, redemption, and the power of human kindness. Hit that subscribe button now. 6 months had passed since that strange, terrifying, wonderful night when Sophia had been caught in the kitchen with a bowl of cold macaroni and cheese. 6 months. Elena could barely recognize her own life anymore. She stood in front of the mirror in the blue room. No, not the blue room anymore. It was just her room now. Home. She stared at her reflection, and for the first time in 5 years, she actually smiled at what she saw. Her face had filled out. Her cheeks had color. Her eyes, which had been dull and lifeless for so long, actually sparkled. Her hair, which she'd always kept pulled back in that tight, painful bun, now fell in soft waves around her shoulders. But the biggest change wasn't on the outside. It was her lungs. She took a deep breath, a real full breath, and it didn't hurt. It didn't end in a coughing fit. It didn't feel like knives stabbing her chest. Dr. Evans had called it a miracle. The combination of the new medication, the therapy, the rest, and the lack of stress had done what he barely dared to hope for. The scarring in her lungs was healing. Actually healing. Mama! Sophia's voice rang out from down the hall. Mama, hurry. We're going to be late. Elena laughed. 6 months ago, Sophia had been a quiet, scared little mouse. Now she was loud and bossy and full of life. She had gained 15 pounds. Her cheeks were round and pink. She ran everywhere, all the time, making noise and mess and joy. "I'm coming, baby," Elena called back. She smoothed down her dress, a beautiful navy blue dress that Daniel had insisted on buying her, and took one more look in the mirror. Today was the day. Today, everything would change again. Downstairs, the mansion was chaos. The good kind of chaos. Maria was in the kitchen, barking orders at her assistant cooks. She was making enough food to feed an army. The smell of roasted chicken, fresh bread, and her famous gumbo filled the entire house. The young maids were decorating the main ballroom, the one that had sat empty and dark for 10 years. Now it was full of lights and flowers and long tables covered in white cloth. Ben, the driver, was outside directing the parking of dozens of cars. And in the center of it all, looking slightly overwhelmed but genuinely happy, was Daniel Rodriguez. He was wearing a suit, but not his usual cold, businesslike suit. This one was softer, warmer. And he was smiling. He smiled a lot these days. "Mr. Rodriguez." Sophia came running down the grand staircase, her new dress, a bright yellow one that made her look like sunshine, flowing behind her. "Are they here yet? Are they really coming?" Daniel caught her as she nearly crashed into him. "Yes, they're really coming. About 50 of them." Sophia's eyes went wide. 50? That's so many." "I know," Daniel said, laughing. "Are you nervous?" Sophia thought about this seriously. "A little. But Mama says being nervous means you care about something. So it's okay to be nervous." "Your mama is very wise," Daniel said softly. Elena appeared at the top of the stairs, and Daniel's breath caught. She looked beautiful. Not in a fancy, painted-on way, but in a real, glowing, alive way. She walked down the stairs, and Daniel met her at the bottom. "You look wonderful," he said. Elena blushed. "Thank you. You look less stressed than I expected." "Oh, I'm terrified," Daniel admitted. "But it's the good kind of terrified." Before Elena could respond, the doorbell rang. A deep, echoing sound that filled the entire house. Everyone froze. "They're here," George said from the doorway. His face was stern, but his eyes were soft. Daniel took a deep breath. "Okay, let's do this." He walked to the massive oak front doors and pulled them open. Standing on the other side were people. So many people. In the front was an elderly black man in a military uniform covered in medals. His eyes were bright and sharp, and when he saw Sophia peeking out from behind Elena, he smiled the warmest smile. "Mr. Rodriguez?" the man said, extending his hand. "I'm Colonel James Mitchell, United States Air Force, retired. I served with Miguel Reyes, Sophia's great-uncle, in the Tuskegee Airmen." Daniel shook his hand, stunned. You knew him?" "I was his wingman," Colonel Mitchell said, his voice thick with emotion. "Miguel saved my life. He flew into enemy fire to draw them away from our squadron. He was the bravest man I ever knew." He turned to Sophia, who was staring at him with huge eyes. "And you," he said, kneeling down so he was at her level, "you look just like him. Same brave eyes." Sophia clutched her great-uncle's cufflink, which she now wore on a chain around her neck. "You really knew him?" "I did," the colonel said. "And I've wanted to meet his family for 70 years. When I saw your story on the news, when I saw that cufflink, I knew I had to come." Behind the colonel were more people. Other veterans, some in uniform, some in regular clothes. Families who had been helped by the GoFundMe that had been created. Single mothers who had lost their jobs and were facing eviction. Sick people who couldn't afford their medication. People who had seen Elena's story and saw themselves in it. And they had all come, because Daniel had invited them. "Welcome," Daniel said, his voice shaking slightly. "Welcome to my home. Our home. Please come in." The ballroom was packed. Every seat at the long tables was filled. The chandeliers that had hung dark and dusty for a decade now blazed with light, making the whole room glow like the inside of a star. Daniel stood at the head of the main table, looking out at all these faces. Strangers who had become friends. People who had been invisible, just like he had been invisible in his own grief. He tapped his glass with a spoon. The room fell silent. "I'm not good at speeches," Daniel began, and a few people laughed. "I'm a businessman. I'm used to talking about profit margins and quarterly reports. But 6 months ago, something happened that changed my life." He looked at Elena and Sophia, who were sitting to his right. "A little girl was caught in my kitchen, eating garbage," Daniel said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "And instead of seeing a thief, I saw a child who was hungry. I saw a mother who was dying to save her daughter. I saw a family that had given everything to help others and had been forgotten by the world. He paused, collecting himself. For 10 years, he continued, I lived in this house like a ghost. I was so buried in my own pain, my own grief over losing my wife, that I forgot there was still a world out there. A world full of people who were suffering. People who needed help. He looked around the room. But Elena and Sophia reminded me of something important, Daniel said. They reminded me that one act of kindness can change everything. That paying attention to the people around you matters. That using your wealth, your power, your privilege to help others, that's not charity. That's just being human. There was a murmur of agreement. So today, Daniel said, his voice growing stronger, I'm announcing something. Something I've been working on with my lawyers and my accountants for the past 3 months. Everyone leaned forward. I'm creating a foundation, Daniel said. The Miguel Reyes Foundation, named after Sophia's great uncle, the hero who gave his life for others. This foundation will do 3 things. He held up one finger. First, it will pay medical bills for families who can't afford treatment. No one should have to choose between medicine and food. No one should have to watch their mother die because they're poor. Elena's hand flew to her mouth. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Daniel held up a second finger. Second, it will provide housing assistance and job training for people who are struggling. Because having a safe place to live and a way to earn money with dignity, that's a right, not a privilege. The room erupted in applause. Daniel waited for it to die down before holding up a third finger. And third, he said, his voice breaking now, it will fund scholarships for children of veterans and first responders. For kids like Sophia, whose families gave everything for this country and got nothing back. The colonel stood up and saluted. Then everyone else stood up, and the applause was deafening. Sophia was crying, clutching her cufflink. Elena was sobbing openly, her whole body shaking. Maria was hugging her assistant cook. Ben was wiping his eyes with his handkerchief. And Daniel, the man who hadn't cried in 10 years, felt hot tears running down his face. Thank you, he said quietly, though no one could hear him over the applause. Thank you for reminding me how to be human again. Later that night, after the food had been eaten and the guests had left and the house had finally grown quiet, Daniel sat in his study. There was a knock on the door. Come in, he called. Elena entered, carrying 2 cups of tea. She handed one to him and sat down in the chair across from his desk. The same chair where Miss Geraldine had once sat, broken and apologetic. I can't believe you did all that, Elena said softly. The foundation. Using Miguel's name. The scholarships. Daniel, that's going to help thousands of people. Millions, if we do it right, Daniel said. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. It's time I actually did something good with it. Elena was quiet for a moment, then said, I got a letter today. From the hospital. They said my scans came back clean. Dr. Evans says if I keep improving like this, I could be in full remission within a year. Daniel's face broke into a huge smile. Elena, that's wonderful. I know, she said, wiping her eyes. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up, and this is all going to be a dream. That I'll be back in my tiny apartment, coughing into a rag, watching Sophia go hungry. It's not a dream, Daniel said gently. This is real. You fought for it. You earned it. No, Elena said, shaking her head. You gave it to me. You saved our lives. Daniel leaned forward. Elena, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to really hear me. She nodded. You saved mine, he said simply. When I found Sophia in that kitchen, when I saw what was happening in my own home while I was hiding in my grief, it woke me up. For the first time in 10 years, I felt something other than pain. I felt purpose. I felt needed. His voice cracked. My wife, Eliza, before she died, she made me promise something. She made me promise I wouldn't let her death turn me into a cold, empty shell. She made me promise I would keep living. Keep loving. Keep being human. He looked down at his hands. I broke that promise, he said. For 10 years, I broke it every single day. But you and Sophia, you gave me a chance to keep it again. So don't thank me. Let me thank you. Elena stood up and walked around the desk. She did something she never would have dared to do 6 months ago. She hugged him. Daniel froze for a moment, surprised. Then he hugged her back, and they both cried, for the pain they'd survived, for the hope they'd found, for the second chance they'd both been given. Upstairs, Sophia was supposed to be asleep. But she was sitting by her window, looking out at the gardens, clutching her great-uncle's cufflink. Hi, Uncle Miguel, she whispered to the stars. I met your friend today, Colonel Mitchell. He said you were brave. He said you were a hero. She smiled. Mama's getting better. She doesn't cough anymore. And Mr. Rodriguez, he's really nice. He made a whole foundation with your name. Can you believe it? You're going to help so many people, even though you're in heaven. She pressed the cufflink to her heart. I'm going to be brave like you, she promised. I'm going to help people too. I'm going to make you proud. A warm breeze blew through the window, gentle and soft, like a hand stroking her hair. Sophia smiled and climbed into bed. For the first time in her entire life, she fell asleep feeling completely, totally, perfectly safe. 3 months later, the Miguel Reyes Foundation held its first fundraising gala. It raised $10 million in one night. 6 months after that, the foundation had paid medical bills for over 500 families. A year after that, they had housed 200 homeless families and provided job training for 1,000 people. And 5 years after that, on the anniversary of the night Sophia was found in the kitchen, Daniel Rodriguez stood on a stage in front of thousands of people and announced that the Miguel Reyes Foundation had helped over 100,000 people. Elena stood next to him, healthy and strong, now the director of the foundation's family services program. Sophia, now 15 years old and tall and confident, stood on his other side. She had just been accepted to a prestigious high school with a full scholarship. She wanted to be a doctor. She wanted to help people, just like her great-uncle had. But the most surprising person on that stage was Miss Geraldine Whitmore. She had served 2 years in prison for embezzlement. When she got out, broken and hopeless, Elena had done something nobody expected. She had hired her, not as a housekeeper, as a volunteer coordinator for the foundation. Someone who understood what it meant to fall, to lose everything, to have to rebuild from nothing. Miss Geraldine had cried for a week straight when Elena offered her the job. And now, 5 years later, she ran the foundation's Second Chance Employment Program, helping formerly incarcerated people find jobs and housing. Redemption, Elena had learned, wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about choosing to be better in the future. As the crowd applauded and cameras flashed, Daniel looked at the 2 women standing beside him, Elena, who had taught him how to see people again, and Sophia, who had taught him that hunger wasn't just about food. It was about connection, about purpose, about love. His wife Eliza would have been proud. He was finally keeping his promise. That night, back at the mansion that was now truly a home, Daniel, Elena, Sophia, and the entire staff sat around the dining room table. Maria had made her gumbo again. It had become a tradition. Can I say something? Sophia asked, standing up with her juice glass raised. Of course, Daniel said, smiling. Sophia looked around the table at all these faces. Her family. Not by blood, but by choice. 5 years ago, Sophia said, her voice clear and strong, I was so hungry I was eating garbage. I was so scared I couldn't even cry. I thought my mama was going to die. I thought we had nothing. She looked at Daniel. But we had everything, she said. We had each other. We had courage. We had hope. And we had you, Mr. Rodriguez. You saw us when we were invisible. You helped us when no one else would. You gave us a second chance. Tears were streaming down her face now. So I want to say thank you, she said. Not just for the food or the house or the medicine, but for seeing us, for treating us like we mattered, for reminding us that we're not alone. She raised her glass higher. To family, she said. The kind you're born with and the kind you choose. To family, everyone echoed, raising their glasses. And in that moment, in that warm, bright room full of laughter and love and second chances, a little girl who had once been so hungry she'd eaten from the trash, and a billionaire who had once been so lonely he'd forgotten how to live, both finally understood the same truth. Wealth isn't measured in money. It's measured in the people who sit at your table. The people who see you when you're invisible. The people who help you when you're hungry, not just for food, but for kindness, for dignity, for hope. And sometimes, if you're very, very lucky, all it takes is one brave little girl, one bowl of cold macaroni and cheese, and one man willing to finally open his eyes to change everything. The end. Thank you for watching this incredible journey with us. If this story touched your heart, if it made you feel something deep and real, please subscribe to this channel. Your support allows us to continue sharing stories of hope, redemption, and the power of human kindness. Hit that subscribe button now, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and remember, you have the power to change someone's life. Sometimes all it takes is paying attention. God bless you all, and we'll see you in the next story.